Okay, we are now live. We got it on the screen. That's okay. Okay, and it is up and it is a little more readable. Can you make it a little larger? No,
Wrong direction.
not helpful.
I can use a paper copy. I brought my microscope.
That's what I'm trying to work. It's to get it all on. Okay, that's readable. Then we'll just have to scroll over. All right.
Yes. So.
Okay. Yeah. how we gonna do this? All right.
There.
Okay. That works. All right.
So Madam Chair, before we go live,
Yeah.
just
live.
oh, we are live now.
We are live.
Great.
So.
So for the record, my name is Lauren Hibbert. I'm the Deputy Secretary of State, and I have with me.
I am Ted Barnett, a fiscal analyst with the Joint Fiscal Office.
And I was going to ask you a staging question. Before we jump right into the fees and what we're doing, I thought it might be prudent to talk to you about and refresh your committee's understanding of how OPR is funded, what our fee structure is, and why we're coming to this committee with this fee adjustment in the manner that we have.
Right.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So the Secretary of State has two funds. We have the Secretary of State Fund and we have the OPR Fund. The Secretary of State Fund is funded primarily through corporations' fees, and those fees are being adjusted in this bill. And the corporation's fees are augmented in part by some federal grants, the Help America Vote Act, which helps with voting initiatives. Tabulators have been purchased with that. A system upgrade is scheduled to occur. We're going to use some of the HAVA money for that. But for the most part, it is corporations' funds that fund our elections team, our corporations team, our admin team, and VESARA, the Vermont Records and Archives Administration in Middlesex. Then we also have the OPR fund, which is a separate, also a special fund, receives both of our funds do not receive general fund monies. And the OPR fund is subsisted only of licensure fees. Within the OPR fund, we regulate professions in two different ways. One is the board model, and in the board model, we're required to silo the board's funds, and their fees can only be used to cover their costs. And then in the advisor model, we pool the funds, and the pool has to cover the costs of the pool.
And you've been going more to the advisor model.
We have, yeah. So I don't think that there's been a new profession created in the state in the board model for many, many years, I think 15 or 20 years. And we have moved some of the board models into the advisor model. And when this discussion began in House Ways and Means, we started, and I think there's still a lot of conversations to be had about the overarching structure of the Office of Professional Regulation, its sustainability as it's currently structured, because we are needing to raise fees this year. It's started to prompt the conversations, and we've needed to raise fees for many years. So our last fee bill in OPR was in 2019, and in 2019, I said I was going to come back in 2022 because it was very painful because we hadn't done a fee bill in quite a while. But I did not do that because it was we were in more COVID time than we are now, and it just wasn't appropriate in terms of legislative resources to bring a fee bill.
Dealing with other things like telemedicine.
Yes, exactly. So we knew that we needed a fee bill this year. We do not have general funds to rely on either of our two funds. We're both special funds. And We have, in the OPR fund, we are running at a deficit of almost 2.5 is what we're projecting. This fee adjustment does not cover that deficit. It will help quite a bit, but it does not make us whole or right. We're trying to do a couple of things within the OPR fund, including reducing our.
Senator McCormick, I need you to just initial who your appointees, the ones that were signed.
Okay.
I'm trying to get that done before the last day of the session. Okay.
So we're doing a couple of things to try and reduce our costs. We have done a couple of things. We are renegotiating our lease. We pay a very high lease rate. I think the second highest in the state. We're in the process of renegotiating that,
Are you leasing from who? The state?
through BGS, we're leasing with a third party.
The third party?
Yeah. And that lease rate occurred because we
got moved out of Redstone, right?
We got moved out of Redstone, then we got moved out of National Life, and now we're at 89 Main above Skinny Pancake. So it's been a domino effect of moves, and we were moved out of National Life after Hurricane Irene, Tropical Storm Irene, and lease space was at a premium, and we were locked into a 10-year lease. So we're coming to the expiry of that lease and renegotiating, and I think that we will have a far better lease rate. We also have not hired 3 positions that we acquired in last year's legislative session, which is not good for our operations, but we felt like we needed to know what the budget path was and get through this legislative session before we should hire into those positions. But we are planning to hire into those positions this summer, if at all possible, if this bill passes. And that has a direct customer service impact. 2 of those positions are licensing administrators, and we need those folks to process applications, return phone calls, process renewals, and help us with our day-to-day work. So really looking forward to being able to fill those positions. And then the biggest cause, or one of the causes, I shouldn't say the biggest cause, but is also our IT spend. And we're continually bringing our IT spend back so that it remains a little bit more in budget. With the corporation's fees, the reason why we're seeking the corporation's fees is we are about to go into 4 IT projects without an IT allocation in this year's budget. And so we're using our special funds to cover those IT projects. One is our elections management system, one is our corporation system, one is our lobbying system, and one is our campaign finance system. So with those bills, we are projecting that fund will be impacted as a result of those procurements. And in fact, we had already projected to the administration that of that Secretary of State fund, we're projecting that we will not have as much available for the general fund sweep. Typically, the general fund comes and does a sweep of our excess revenue, and we're projecting less than we normally have for this year. And we're anticipating that we're going to continue to project less for the next couple of years.
I thought you had a deficit.
We have a deficit in the OPR fund.
The OPR.
But we generally have a sweep in our Secretary of State fund, 2 separate funds. Sorry if I wasn't clear. So with that being said, we knew that we needed to do a fee increases pretty much across the board in the Office of Professional Regulation. And we also, because we are doing these IT spends and because the corporation's fees have not been touched in many years, we wanted to do a fee adjustment in that space as well to start building back the buffer that we're losing with our IT spends. So setting the stage, that's why we're here. And we looked at inflation since the last time that the fee was adjusted. We were using an inflation model, and I'll let Ted speak to the specifics of the inflation model since he's the one who designed it. And there's a couple spaces on this spreadsheet, not currently on the screen, where we have adjusted down from inflation because the inflation model would have had too much of a burden on the particular licensee group. So as we're going through, I'm happy to talk about the rationale for why we did that, but almost across the board, universally, we made that adjustment, and it's notated in that sort of salmon color because the impact to the profession would have been too great had we gone with the inflation model. So with that,
Okay,
I'm happy to answer any questions on the funds or the methodology, but otherwise I would turn it over to Ted to talk about the
floor is yours.
All right, very simply, we took the amount of inflation that occurred between year the fee was last changed in December 2022. And so that inflation metric we used was the personal consumption expenditures model. It's used by the Federal Reserve, and that's the one we're using more often within the Joint Fiscal Office to measure inflation. And so in column 4, you have the profession. In column 5 of this table, you have the year last changed. Column 6 lists the current amount of a particular fee. And then column 7 is these inflation adjustments. And so you'll notice different columns because in statute, in some cases, the initial application fee was changed at a different date than the renewal fee. And that's where we get some of the exceptions and how we decided to, or the Ways and Means decided to adjust these fees. And so those are kind of the main focus. The entirety of the spreadsheet also has different information about the dollar increase in the fee and the additional revenue that would be raised for these increases. But that's the general idea behind the inflation model.
Okay. Questions at this point? Okay, why don't you walk us through them?
Sure, and I can, would you like me for us to focus on the salmon colors where there are exceptions, or?
Let's do a quick walkthrough of what they all are. I don't think I've ever seen all in one place.
Sure. So just starting with acupuncturists, and you'll see there's some general trends. The last time that those fees were adjusted was 2019. So the inflation adjustment is 13.82. So that takes the initial application from 100 to 115 and the renewal application from 240 to 275. And just for everybody's awareness, we are on the advisor professions here. So, and then the addiction professional, again, that was adjusted in 19, so using the same rate of inflation, same effect on the initial application. So you'll see that the initial application for the advisor profession has been 100, and it's going to be raised to 115. And then the renewal is lower than 240 for that profession at 225, and so it will go to 260.
Okay. Well, one fee I remember adjusting was initial nursing license. Aren't addiction professionals people we need that we're out trying to?
Yes.
And okay, so I guess the question is, does that, I'm not going to have that discussion now, but does that discourage?
Well, so
what is it in New Hampshire?
I don't know off the top of my head what it is in New Hampshire. We can do some analysis of that for this committee if you would like. But we always have prioritized keeping the initial application fee lower than the renewal fee because we understand that those are people who have not been working in the profession and need to get into the profession. And then, Madam Chair, your initial question, which you said we're not going to get into, but I just want to respond a little bit about, goes to how the office is funded, which is we do a lot of public good through licensure of professionals. I think we all can agree, and I don't think it's just me as someone who has been in the licensing world for many, many years now. that licensure has a public good. And we've always structured it as a state as the cost borne by licensees. And the cost can be significant and is significant. And then there's new public policies that come into effect, like a compact, like COVID flexibilities, like second chance determinations, like fast track endorsement. We've done a lot of impactful work around how we do licensure, but there has been a cost to the licensee base to bear that cost of that good work. And that is the conversation that I think we need to continue to think about, perhaps really get into next session so that we can understand, is there other models? Should we be asking for a general fund allocation? Should we allow for more expressly us to share some of the Secretary of State special fund? Right now, we can't take money from that special fund to the OPR fund. Should we ask for IT allocation for our IT costs? There's lots of things that we could consider. Should we stop pooling? Should we stop siloing the board funds and just run it all like an advisor model so we can make some of these sort of more policy discretionary choices on how to fund OPR with our more wealthy or more populous professions supporting some of the ones that don't make as much money or aren't as populous. But those are all huge policy conversations that, while they're around this entire fee bill, we tried to not get into too much on this in this bill because it would have really slowed down our work this session.
Okay. I've got Senator Bray and then Senator Flock.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Can you remind me, so are these fees in the traditional sense that you run the program, in essence, you divide the cost of running the program by the number of licensees, and that's the fee? It's a break-even model just to cover the cost of managing that program?
Yes, that is essentially our allocation model. We take the total cost of OPR, we divide it by the number of licensees, then we allocate it to each profession based on the number of licensees that they have. The one nuance to that is enforcement costs. We take the total cost of enforcement, we divide it by the number of prosecutions and complaints, and we allocate that to the professions that have enforcement costs.
Okay, that was my question, because it used to be, if there was a lot of problem in your profession, it costs more because it costs more.
Yes, and that is still the model.
So by going to this advisor model as opposed to a board, you're pooling all just the general money. But that if there's one profession in there that has more complaints, more prosecutions, more investigations, then that extra cost is the base cost is everybody. The extra cost goes to the profession that general.
Well, for the advisor pool, the cost of enforcement across all of the professions in the pool are allocated to the advisor pool. They're not specified by profession. We track it by profession. I could tell you, for instance, that funeral is a more expensive profession for us in terms of enforcement costs than auctioneers. But the cost of funeral enforcement is carried some by the auctioneers because they're both in the pool. They share the costs and they share the risk of being in the pool. Whereas nursing has a high enforcement cost.
Right,
And we silo their budget through the allocation model of
but they have a board, right?
they have a board.
Okay. Okay, so the more we go to an advisor program, the less direct relationship there is between problems in your profession and what you pay.
That is correct. But there's also benefits potentially because then we can make a policy decision of, I'm going to use nursing, licensed nursing assistants. We need licensed nursing assistants in the state. We can keep license, and we'll get to the LNA fee. We have kept the LNA fee in the reasonable space. but only because they have APRNs and registered nurses and LPNs in their board with them. If they were a standalone profession, that would be a very expensive profession for us.
For what is not a highly paid.
For what is
position.
not a highly paid
That we
position, and we need it. And we've been able to keep the LNA fee low because we were looking at it with those other fees. If we were able to look at it holistically, all the fees that OPR charges, we probably could keep it even lower because we would be able to charge a retail drug outlet more than what we do now. Not that we're going to, but we could to offset. That would be a policy decision where we could charge some people more to keep
All right.
LNA licenses low.
Right, because we need them and we are.
And we need retail drug outlets as well, just to be
Yes.
clear on the record.
We do, but I'm not going there with PPMs. Okay, Senator Brand.
So just so, the renewal, are these all annualized or are renewals for 2 years?
This is a 2-year cycle.
And so initial is for the first 2-year cycle, or
Yes.
however much of it. And are they all annualized? So if you join in November, you're really getting 13 months of coverage or.
So-
licenses.
Our policy is if you apply for initial application before the renewal date and you're more than 90 days, or you're within the 90-day window, then you get the full next renewal date. But if you apply more than 90 days out, then your initial is that 90 plus 10 or whatever, and then you have to leave it.
And then, this, I don't mean, this, this is not a confrontational question, but I've had it, from, so there's barber shop. I see it's 100 and 300 in the current scheme, and it changes a little bit under the new proposal. So when he says to me, I'm not sure what you or I get for that fee, he's cutting hair forever.
It wasn't a barber shop, it was a beautician who complained to me because she paid X $100 for a license and nobody ever showed up. She said she could have extension cords and ungrounded wires running all over the place.
So we do an initial inspection of barber shops and cosmetology shops, and we do randomized checks of barber shops and cosmetology shops. Whether we hit all of them every 2 years, probably not. We have 2 inspectors who work for the office. We really prioritize places where that could cause significant damage to the public pharmacies. Funeral homes have been, we've been really watching those. But we do.
Horses in the backyard or.
Right, it's really important.
Yeah.
So, but we do inspect barber shops and cosmetology shops. We also protect their ability to from unlicensed practice. So sometimes people don't understand that by being a mandatory license requirement in the state for a barber or cosmetology shop, that means that someone just can't open a shop across the street from you without a license and start cutting hair and charging money. So we investigate and prosecute unlicensed practice. We make sure that the standards for the shops are hopefully easy to understand, that people are complying with them. And then we do these random inspections across the state of barber shops and cosmetology shops. And then when we receive a complaint, we almost always do an inspection about a barber shop or cosmetology shop.
Can you educate me what the risks are that make it a licensed profession? Just very briefly.
For specifically barber shops and
I
cosmetology.
mean, I get asked this question, so I'm gonna pass it on.
Yeah. For barber shops and cosmetology shops, the decision was made a long time ago to regulate them.
Yep.
But the decision was really based on communicable diseases and also on the chemicals that are within their shops. The chemicals within a barber and cosmetology shop are highly combustible, need to be preserved and stored the right way. And we want to make sure that that's what's being followed. And if you ever have somebody who's aggravated about that particular issue, please send them to us because we can give them data on how many cases we've prosecuted in a particular profession and the reasons why we've done prosecutions. Most licensees, once they understand that we are an enforcement arm to make sure that the essential standards are being kept, once they see that we've done that, if it's a profession that's inspected, once they understand how the inspection program is working, they do understand the value of the Office of Professional Regulation. But I'm always happy to have that conversation.
Okay. And I'll save till later why you have to go back to barber school to be able to use a straight razor. When that's the only thing that you can't do when you come out of cosmetology. When you're getting your hair cut, it's like being at the dentist. You're in a very vulnerable position.
I know.
It's hard to move.
When I became director of the Office of Professional Regulation in 2018, what was told to me is, remember, every legislator gets their hair cut. So,
That's right. Okay, let's keep moving. You,
Questions?
yeah,
What's the current staffing level in OPR?
yeah, we currently have, I'm just counting. We have 36 employees, one open vacancy that is being filled in the beginning of May, and then three positions that we have not yet posted or filled.
So 36 is 3 to 39, and 1 is 40.
Yes,
Okay.
of total positions available to us, but we currently have 36 filled.
Okay, because I had remembered 41 as the number the last time.
Yeah.
we met, but it was actually-
We've had some people leave and we've made decisions not to fill those positions.
Well, that was going to be then my next question is, I see all the fee increases. What professions have had fee decreases?
The decreases.
Mhm.
We are doing that in this bill for real estate and one other, I forgot.
Well, I can't remember.
I can't remember off the top. I'd have to scroll through the spreadsheet, but I know real estate. We probably could have done a larger fee decrease for real estate. I'll just jump to the real estate part. We are reducing fees in real estate. Given where their budget is, their board budget, their budget is very much in the black. We chose to not reduce it further because we're anticipating that we're going to lose real estate licensees in the very near future. We had a boom of real estate licenses as a result of COVID and the real estate market. And so we got a large influx of new licensees. A real estate salesperson license is relatively easy to obtain. It's a 40-hour course. A lot of people got into the industry in COVID times, and we're anticipating that people are going to get out.
the test is not that easy.
No, I don't think it's easy. I don't think it's easy, but in terms of barrier to entry,
Yeah.
which is exactly what I love about real estate, because if you're entrepreneurial, you can study hard for that test. It's not like going to college. It's not 4 years, it's 40 hours, and you can make a very good income, all based on your own entrepreneurial life. But it is a profession that's very influenced by the market, and sort of the canary in the coal mine for us.
So for all intents and purposes, if you had a profession in which you had a relatively large influx in new applicants, you don't necessarily have cost increases that increase at the same rate as the applicant. That would be a reason why the real estate rate of licensure fell. Is that a fair statement?
So in terms of processing the applications, it does take some time, but the system is fairly remarkable at streamlining that process for us, which is one of the reasons why we are so invested in our IT. The IT is really the backbone of our office at this point.
And you're looking for a new IT system?
Not in this,
Okay.
not in OPR, but for every other division, with the exception of OPR and Vassar, yes. But the costs do expand on enforcement. Usually, the enforcement rate goes up proportionally to the licensing rate. That proportion stays fairly consistent. And it does take staff time to process applications. So I wouldn't say that it's disproportional, the amount of work I think is relatively proportional to the amount of licensees. And then there are anomalies, like if there's a criminal background check related to the initial application, that obviously takes more staff time to review. And that also goes up.
Well, I'm looking at the adjustments where there are inflation adjustments. It looks, at least if this is representative, that those that were done in 2017 have 17.98%, those in 19 have 13.
Yes.
Is that pretty, and is that just based on, an inflation rate, or is that just based on an annualized? How did you come up with those numbers?
Sure. So we took the annual average in, let's say, 2017, for example, and then the percentage change in inflation to December 2022, using the personal consumption expenditure metric, which tends to run a little bit lower than CPI. And so that was the methodology throughout the sheet.
Okay, across the board. Okay. Yes, overall, one of the things that you would think about an organization that processes lots of stuff and lots of people is you'd think there'd be an economy of scale at some point, that once you get enough professions and once you get enough people, that the cost per person would decline.
And that has happened.
Right.
That has happened. If you look at our budget, cost per licensee in 16 versus cost per licensee, or that was before our IT spend. So it really would be better to look at 2018. If you look at our cost per licensee in 18 compared with our cost per licensee projected in 23, 23 is lower.
So if we got everybody to fill all of these slots of licensees, you wouldn't have any fee at all.
If we wouldn't have any adjustment. I know. Well, if we could get all of the slots for addiction professionals, then we'd be a much happier state.
Well, I just think about it, Volume, and I just think back to IBM when it was before Global Foundries. The thing that astounded me as I heard them is every year, in terms of the price that they sold the items, the same item to the customer, their bid had to be lower than the year before, because they had to show progress about becoming more efficient and being able to do better and higher processing. And that really is my underlying question is, do you have a program in stock that's focused on how you can reduce costs, how you can be more efficient, how you can process things faster, and if so, how's that working?
Some of that is built into our IT system. We are constantly tracking how quickly we process applications. The delay time, our system can tell us, how many days it's been since we've had an application, and if the burden of the delay is on that office or on the applicant themselves, because a lot of times a very common work process for us is we receive an application, we look at it that day or the next day, we notice that there's an issue with it, we send it back to the applicant, and they have the burden to respond to us. And this is all done in the system. We can track days in our court versus days in the applicant's court. We try to turn around applications as quickly as possible, and we have been able to, with policy decisions, but really get down some of our licensing times. For instance, and registered nurse who's coming to us from out of state, we are processing that application usually within an hour, which is remarkable. Now, that was a decision we made to prioritize that application, given where we were. Some of our applications take a very long time because we're waiting for transcripts from another school, we're waiting for verification from another state. So there's factors that are far outside of our control. But we are paying attention to that. We recently implemented some group mailboxes so that our staff is not getting individual emails from a licensee or an applicant to a profession, but they're going to a combined box, and we're doing cross training so that people can cover and answer questions, even though that's not quote unquote their profession. So yes, we are really focused on trying to deliver our services faster and cross training our staff so that people can cover for each other. And we have made a lot of decisions to reduce our costs. as much as we can. Now, that being said, staff is our most valuable resource across all of our divisions at the Secretary of State. Our staff are part of the classified bargaining agreement. We support and think that the Pay Act should happen for our staff, obviously. So our staff costs are our largest expense across the board. But they also are what makes our entire organization run.
But you don't control those.
And we don't control it. Yeah.
Senator McCoy.
Yeah, about 4 years ago, we required builders to register. Is that with your shop?
Yes, this.
Yeah, how's that going?
It's going well. We opened up the application December of last year, and it's mandatory registration as of the 1st of this year, of this month, sorry. I think we still have outreach to do, but we do have a significant number of both businesses and individuals registered.
I've had one
Okay.
complaint,
Okay.
and people with a complaint are more likely to speak than people who are at it. It was from a sole practitioner saying that it seems that the thing is set up for larger companies that can actually have an office staff.
To do the application.
Yeah, to do the paperwork. And he says, he's a carpenter, and he's estimating, probably exaggerating, but he's estimating a third of his time will be spent on paperwork.
Oh, to do the contract with the homeowner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I am, again, always happy to talk. You can always pass these folks
I
on
was
to
gonna
me.
say, but
but-
you didn't do that, we did.
I mean, I participated in the legislative process, but yes, that was a legislative policy decision. And the decision really was, back to the rationale for it, if you want a talking point for it, was if the job is for over $10,000, that there should be a trail, a paper, documentation of the understanding. And just because somebody's registered, they don't have to do a contract with somebody if the total job is under $10,000. And I have spoken with a lot of people who are like, all the jobs are over $10,000 now, which I think is arguably true. But that was the policy decision, and we do have well, it's not really a sunrise, but a legislative report back in a couple of years, I don't remember the exact year, on the program and the issues we're seeing and the strengths that we're seeing to the legislature. So I know that conversation will continue, and whether 10,000 was the right watermark,
Did that come from us? Was that in the law?
Yes, it is in
That's
the
not
law.
your
Yeah.
decision.
We
Okay.
did it.
Yeah, well, just to be fair, we have a colleague of ours who's no longer in the Senate, said rather angrily.
It took several years.
Yeah.
And it is definitely departure from the tradition of your word is your bond, and
It was a hard legislative conversation.
Do you think that maybe the 10,000 line that's all those lines of things that somebody just sort of makes up.
and we may want to look at that given the
Yeah.
inflation and material costs.
I think
If all jobs are $10,000, I'm getting really nervous.
I don't think all jobs really are, but I said that sort of flippantly,
Yeah.
but our office was proposing an even lower threshold than 10,000, because what we were seeing was significant fraud in the 3,000 to, yeah. So, I support and obviously now need to administer the program at 10,000. And if that needs to be relooked at in future sessions, I'm hopeful that we have the data because of the regulation to be able to sustain and support the conversation in whichever direction it goes.
Aren't you getting complaints at the $10,000 level at this point?
I don't think we have gotten any complaints about home contractors yet, but I could be wrong.
Are you getting at lower levels then, even though?
No, I don't think we've received a complaint. And I think part of that is that homeowners don't know what we're doing. right now. So that's part of the outreach campaign that we need to do.
As we go to Attorney General Consumer Fraud.
I think that's where they're going now, and we're working with the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Program to get the right ones filtered to us. And you probably don't remember the specifics of the legislation, but there actually was a period of time where we don't have enforcement power. So we're still in that period of time. For if somebody's unregistered, we don't have enforcement power right now. If somebody defrauded somebody and was registered, then we would have authority to pursue on professional conduct charges.
Okay. Can we, committee, you want to walk through these?
Not really.
Not really?
That's why.
If we know that there's a formula that has been followed throughout, and we can look at
So
exceptions.
why don't we look at exceptions?
Yeah.
Great.
If we're okay with the formula.
Try not to make anyone dizzy.
Yeah, little motion sickness.
Right.
So our first example of a deviation is dietitians. And the rationale for the deviation was, had we followed the inflation model, their initial application fee was last adjusted in 1997. And the rate of inflation since 1997 is 68%.
Okay.
So clearly, we
Okay.
did not want to do that. And so we adjusted it just to the standard inflation rate, with the standard since 2019.
So it went from,
100 to 150,
okay, that's.
which felt like a much more
And
manageable.
100 seems like fairly high in 97.
Yes, so that's a really interesting thing as you look through these fees is in 1997, $100 was worth a lot more. And I think that somewhat answers your question, Senator Brock, is when you look at the inflation that's occurred plus the fees, we actually have been able to, through economies of scale, continually kept our fees low as you look at it by the year and the cost of living, as opposed to straight money. So right, in 1997, $100 was worth $68 more
Yeah.
than it is now. And luckily the math worked out really well there of 168. So I can't do that with every fee, but there I can. The next one was occupational therapist temporary license. This is a non-renewable license. And we didn't want to adjust it 17%, so we added less than that and made it 70.
Okay. And that's a temporary,
That's like somebody who's in occupational therapy school, a student who is working in a facility.
okay,
And needs a license to be in the facility. So, we did think that it should go up, but we did not think that it should go up by 17%. Yeah. I should just note on background for fees, sometimes we talk about, and conversations have included, the siloing, the combining, the importance of a profession or a workforce demand for a profession. Another factor that just hasn't come up naturally yet in our conversation is whether the individual actually pays the fee or whether the business where the person is working pays the fee. And so sometimes that is a piece of the calculus as well. So again, body piercers and tattooists, their initial application was last adjusted in 1997. It was either 75 or 100. It felt like it would go too far to raise it with the inflation model. So we did a lower amount at 100.
It's interesting that a tattooist and a weld drawer are charged the same amount, curiously.
Yeah, it's by statutory design, the way that we don't enumerate each profession. You'll see as you look through the bill, we have a standard advisor fee with exceptions.
so is there anybody else in that list?
Not in the advisor pool.
Okay.
I will have to change view.
You're good. This is the
Right.
board professions. So now we're in the board professions. Many of these were touched in 2019, so the same standard that you've seen previously. But the first deviation is the chiropractors, and that's because their fee has been the same since 2001 for the initial application of 200, and the same fee since 2013 of 265. So that inflation change on both of those felt dramatic for chiropractors. So we are recommending 225 for the initial application and 295 for the renewal. And interestingly, for chiropractors, they typically don't work in a place that will reimburse them for their fees, but they can typically, especially if they own their own business, deduct their licensure fees as in taxes. Osteopathic physicians, this is one where we are recommending a fee reduction. That was the one that I forgot. I knew we were doing it in real estate. So it's a fee reduction of their current application from 500 to 450, and from their renewal, it is increasing from 300 to 350. So what we did was look at the revenue streams. We wanted to make it more accessible to apply, but a little higher following the inflation model, or actually we deviated from the inflation model on the renewal. But that does make that budget for the osteopathic physicians in a steady place. The next is real estate, which we've already discussed. Real estate, the offices are remaining the same, and that's reflected here. But the individual licenses are going down for the renewal by $20 each. And then now we're in corporations.
I'm pretty sure all of these are by inflation.
They are.
Yep.
We don't have any deviation in corporations.
Inflation adjustment 81.98%.
Yes, those haven't been adjusted since 1993.
And when we looked at the size of
But it only went up to $20.
Oh, this one I should have done in a salmon color.
That one went down. Transfer.
So some of these, yes, I would have to go back and update with some salmon colors here.
Okay. Didn't go, you just kept that.
Some of them we held the same and some we adjusted.
These are Bud's comprehensibles, DFR. Worse. All right, and these came out of Ways and Means.
They did.
In here, one thing I would note on this spreadsheet is for corporation fees, information about the median fee cost in comparable states is also included. So the current fees in Vermont, and then the current fees in
Our sister states.
yes.
So we do well on some and not so well on others.
That is correct. Some you'll see
Looks
we are,
like we are good on a lot. All right.
in terms of, we are well below the median for the
We haven't looked at
majority.
these because we don't get the money, but I'll bet you we don't have any DFR fees that haven't been adjusted since 1997.
That's right. I mean, we really haven't, for the corporation's fees, we did do an adjustment in 2015. You'll see that, but since then there has not been an adjustment, and the last significant one was in 2013. Some of these fees have not been touched ever or have never been established, and we're creating them in this bill. or specifying them. I shouldn't say creating them.
I guess the question is, how often are they used too? I mean, if you've done 2 in 20 years.
Do we have that? How to go over, we can see, not, you can see a little bit, how much revenue and the filings in each of these. That's
Okay,
column number
10.
10. And then the revenue we're projected
get
to,
my magnifying glass.
I know.
I know, it's the only way to get all the numbers on the paper. Okay.
And then if you're like me, it's hard to follow a line across, so it's very complicated.
Figure this out. Okay,
Are there any like oddball professions that will be fun to go on and talk about?
In the OPR fund,
Yeah,
well, they're all oddballs and I love them all equally. That's what you're supposed to say, right? You know, I think, no, I mean, I think we're trying really hard to use a single methodology across all of them. We did speak to each board. The deputy director for the Office of Professional Regulation and our research analyst, our senior research analyst, spoke with each profession and showed them where their budgets were and the fee projections and how this bill would get them where that would have an effect on their board budget, specific board budget. While the boards, I think, understood, so some boards really supported what we were doing. Some boards had some questions. I think most understand it, given the model. I have had some boards ask why we don't pool our resources. I mean, that is a discussion that the professions themselves are interested in having, which was of interest to me. And then, you know, we just are trying to be as fiscally responsible as possible in terms of our costs and keeping costs down. But I don't have an anomaly profession.
we
You
have
know,
no more hog reeves.
What?
We have no more hog reeves.
No.
That's a shame.
okay. I also know in the past that especially nursing,
Yeah, can we go to nursing?
representatives were here. I'll look at Ways and Means, but is there any group
No,
that's outraged?
nursing in particular, and this dovetails with the conversation that I think we'll really have tomorrow about compacts. Nursing, we have lost approximately 1/3 of our licensee population, not our nurses in our facilities,
Okay,
just to be clear.
but your license.
And I'll do a thumbnail of a compact. A compact allows you to practice in another state with your compact license that was issued by another state. So before we joined the nurse licensure compact, which we did several sessions ago, if you were to practice nursing in the state of Vermont, either in our borders or via telehealth, you had to have a Vermont license. Now, if you are a member of a compact state and you're practicing nursing within our borders or via telehealth, you do not have to have a Vermont license. And we have lost approximately 1/3 of our licensed nurses. Now, the nurses are still here, they're still working, they're just working on a different state license. And the important thing to remember with compacts is it doesn't necessarily reduce our costs because we still have to pursue enforcement actions against those nurses. We have had nurses who are here under compact practice authority who have diverted narcotics, who have hurt patients. We have had to pursue unprofessional conduct charges against those nurses to preclude them from working in our state. So our costs have not gone down dramatically because we've lost the compact nurse license. Because we have lost the requirement to process that application, but our costs are kind of,
Revenues have gone down.
our revenue has gone down, but our costs have stayed fairly stable. And And that goes into the policy discussions about, and we had these when we passed the nurse licensure compact, I believe that was in 2019, about the public benefit of the nurse licensure compact, the ease of facilities to bring nurses in. It has now become sort of the standard of what nursing students want their home state to have as a compact license. So I think the compact decision, the rationale to join the nurse licensure compact was a solid one. I think it was a good policy decision. It is having a fiscal impact on our office. And that fiscal impact is part of why we're here, to an extent, because we've lost.
Might inform us as we look at other compacts and what the fees might be.
Yeah, I would encourage us to inform not whether or not we should join other compacts, but at the model of funding for the office.
The other cost though is how many of those nurses are travelers, not just someone who says, well, I'd like to go to Vermont and ski this winter, so I'll work during the week and ski in the weekend. But the travelers, which are costing us significantly more.
Right.
And that doesn't show up in your budget, but it shows up in the hospital budgets and nursing home budgets.
I'm not the best expert for you on the number of travelers that our state is using, but I will say that before COVID, before the compact, our state was a high user of traveling nurses. We will continue to be a high user of traveling nurses until I don't know what the solution is, because we're not graduating enough nurses. Our state college system is rejecting people from the nursing programs who they would say are qualified. They don't have enough slots for the nursing students. So we just aren't.
That we're getting nursing instructors and we've raised.
Yeah, there's been a lot of
Wages.
incentives and, but we don't grow enough of our own. So we will always need to bring nurses, either graduates from nursing programs from other states into our state or travelers into our state to fill our nursing needs.
Travelers are safer if you're 21 years old. Because if you don't like it, you can go to Arizona next December.
Yeah. The stories I love, and I hear a couple of them, probably 2 or 3 a month are, I came here on a traveling assignment and I love Vermont and I decided to stay. And that does happen. That does happen.
That's right.
But it's not happening at a rapid enough clip.
We need to do something to help them make social connections and get rooted and not work all the time. Okay. All right, committee. Questions?
I already asked mine.
Okay. I'm gonna let
I have a
this.
question.
Yeah.
Just overall, how much money are we talking about in terms of the
Yeah.
increase?
Sure. So I will scroll up into the fiscal note.
Note attached to,
Yes,
this is the first page.
that's right. So the revenue generated by both board and advisor will licensing fees would increase special fund revenue to the OPR fund by $3.5 million biannually. We had estimated biannually there's a lot of different ways, Lauren can speak to this, of when and how folks renew, so we estimated biannually.
Yes.
Just
on that,
That's
essentially.
1.5 something.
Yeah, depending on which professions renew in fiscal year 2024 and 2025. And we are doing a renewal every 2 months, and we have a collection of profession types that are renewing at that time. We have approximately now 170 different profession types in the Office of Professional Regulation. So we can't do them all at the same time. We have to do them, in 2 month chunks.
That's a impressive list. Okay.
And then corporations, yeah.
Yes. Corporations fees would increase by an estimated $1.8 million, and this is annually. And as Lauren has mentioned, in this fund, if there's an excess in the fund, it gets swept back to the general fund. But that is dependent on IT projects.
OPRs not get swept, but you haven't had anything to sweep.
We were in the positive in 2017 of 3 million. We entered into our IT project, and we have not been in the positive since 2020. I would have to look at it.
How long is your IT project slated?
Yeah, we're past implementation, and we've been past implementation for a while. We have been making modifications to the system and upgrades. Part of that has been because of new legislative demands. So when you think about, my favorite example of this is COVID 2020. We had to create, as I said that we had 170, I immediately was like, oh, we have far more than that. But we had to create multiple pathways into the system in 2020 that never had existed before, because we did not have, previously, if you answered the question, have you done the exam in any of the professions, then you couldn't submit your, and you answered no, then you could not submit your application. Of course, all of those graduates of 2020 could not complete an exam and would not have been eligible for a license unless we had changed our system. So we had to create all of those new pathways in our system to allow for the application to come through on a temporary basis while they were waiting for the exam. So we've made significant and very policy driven decisions to our IT platform. I would say that we probably have 3 more years of projected spend before we get into straight maintenance. But we will always have a maintenance cost to our system. We're never going to be at a zero cost system for us. And our projected hoped for right now is about 80,000 a month. And we're hoping to get it down to 50 once we're past our, our.
And that is for what? Is that personnel to run the system, upgrades?
That's upgrades and deployment of changes in the system. We have a lot of functionality in the system that our staff can control, but there's certain things that we are outside of our modification.
All right. Okay.
And we have a third-party contract that we manage.
And these are people who monkey with the computers, or it's new computers, or it's reprogramming?
It is developers who can make changes to our software. Engineers, yeah, IT
So
professionals.
like every time there's an app update that pops up in my phone or a software update,
Those are people.
I don't know what they do, but I have to restart my phone or my computer. And so this would be those kinds of updates.
Exactly.
I assume if
If
you've
we
got
needed-
new bugs, hackers, all
Exactly,
that,
right.
cybersecurity. Okay.
And it's pretty standard in IT world that you now, it's not like you do a one-time purchase of a product. You have to purchase the product, implement the product, and then maintain the product. And it's not inexpensive to do that.
Okay.
But it had, the project on whole has saved us considerable money, because if we still were accepting paper applications, paper renewals, then we would be in quite a pickle.
Why?
Because that would take so much time for us to process and enter into a system, and it would cost significant state resources, state employees to do that work. Right now, the system is doing an immense amount of work.
We used to have people that just inputted your tax forms into the tax department's computer system. Now, everything is it's scanned, it's no human error, no transcribing numbers. It goes much more quickly, but it's $1 million a year, we just found out, to the Ed Fund. to just keep that section upgraded every time we tinker with anything. The entire system has to be up,
Yeah, I mean,
has to
one
be
way,
adjusted.
one way to think about it is in 2013, I'm gonna get this a little wrong, but in 2013, we had approximately 34 staff members. And we had approximately 40,000 licensees. Now we're at 36 and we have 86,000 licensees. So we've more than doubled and kept our staff.
Keep your staff relatively the same.
And I think improved our customer service because we are approving licenses faster and we're able to respond to people faster. So, but it does come at a cost, and I think the cost is reasonable, but we have to manage it and keep our eyes on it.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you. I know you're coming back tomorrow to talk to us about compacts.
I look forward to it.
We got kind of bogged down in psychologist one yesterday. I'm gonna let this float out on YouTube and the internet. If anybody has any concerns, we'll hear from them.
But
But
please send concerns if you want me to triage them.
we'll let you know. I mean, other times when we've done fee bills, the room has been full.
It hasn't been this year, I think, because people understand inflation in a different way.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Ted?
Somehow I got. This is somewhere along the line. I thought it was okay.
Back to paper with your notes, because I don't know if you need paper. Okay. So,
But
Yes.
I knew you were coming next.
okay. I'm gonna try to get this bill out maybe Friday, unless somebody would like a little longer time. I just was feeling really good. We had most of our bills out, but then we got the 4 compacts. There's a cannabis bill and an alcohol bill in economic development. They both have a fee in them. So they're coming here, and apparently the bottle bill is also coming here. Those are the biggies I've learned about. We're still trying to talk to the House about child care, paid family leave, and reality, but I'm not sure how well we're doing. Okay, I've got everybody's name. And we've only got a few that are missing, which I will give to Senator McDonald. I would like to start getting those appointments out.
I don't know if anybody else is having a problem, but I'm having a problem both with this committee and with economic development. People not returning your calls.
That's not my problem. Yeah, same problem.
Yeah, I just wonder if we should come to a point in which we decline to, actually
Well,
vote
we
no into
decide.
conservation.
Maybe
If
we
people aren't
should,
interested enough to call back the people who are trying to confirm them,
and they may
Why
not
should we
know
vote
what
for it?
it is, so we may need to let
Send
Kendall
us
or the
around.
office know upstairs that we are having this difficulty, and maybe they should send us the contact information along with the appointment. And B, they should let
well,
people
because that
know
was
to
another
expect
problem,
their
is
call.
I had at least 2 where the phones were disconnected. You couldn't get over.
They're not on the anti-poverty board. No, I must be charmed. I got all 3 of mine for economic development first try. So,
I would just chime in to say I had much more luck via email as well, but some people don't have emails available.
That's right.
yeah, we have your, I think, Keisha, we have Jill had yours, and are you finished with them?
Yeah, I think I had 3 and they're all set.
Okay, so we'll try and set aside a little time on Friday, maybe if we finish up earlier tomorrow. We'll try and start going through those and just get it done before. It might not get crazy, but you never know. So I'd say this is the most copacetic fee bill, professional regulation bill that we've done, so. I'm holding my breath. Okay, we're going on to discussion, and Jake and Brad are here. And a couple things have come up. Communities, Stowe in particular, is very concerned about what's going to happen to their income sensitized people, many of whom are on a fixed income. Their house that was worth $400,000 2 years ago is now worth $600,000. What's that gonna do? Their tax bill is gonna drive them to Florida. And then it came up the other day that where originally our goal was 80% of people are income sensitized, that we're down to 64. And I thought we were in the 70s last time we checked. So just trying to figure out, we know we can't do anything this year because the yield in the December 1st, but trying to figure out what is if history is repeated, the housing market will moderate. I think it already is, but probably unless it crashes, not go down as, not dropping rapidly. But what is going on out there, I'm not sure what we pegged that 80% to. Was it median income, average income? Where, what's happened? Why are these things happening? That we can decide what we want to do. And I don't know which one of you wants to come up first. Do you want to come together?
Mine is pretty short.
Okay,
So I'd be happy to go first.
you can have the nice chair.
Is that this one?
That's that one. If there's two
That's
of
much
you,
worse.
one gets, but we've had complaints about circulation being cut off with legs. Staff chair in there.
It's right.
It's looking pretty good. We haven't had that complaint in here yet.
The other advantage of that chair is the metal chair is wired with electricity. Whereas that one is not.
I'm gonna go to the Christmas tree shop and get some cushions for that. Okay. Jake, the floor is yours. What's going on?
Okay, Jake Feldman, Tax Department. There's a document with my name on it on your website.
All right. Is that also in our pile, or is that just?
Oh, yeah, that's the last.
Okay, it is in your pile under professional regular. All right. Oh, this one we can read.
Yeah, it's pretty short, and I'm trying to provide. I've been listening lately to the conversations about Stowe and property values, and I'm trying to provide just some general data points that I think will be useful to you. So the first thing is, my area of expertise is property tax credits. And so this is mostly about property tax credits and how that ties in with property values going up. Senator McDonald, I heard the 80% statistic, and we have these old printouts of statistics books from like 1990 going back to 1970 something or other, and I went trying to find the 80%, but I was kind of striking out.
This would be 97, right?
97 law passed,
99.
the $75,000 cap on people being income sensitive was presented as being 80%, like the 80th percentile or or 80% of the filers. 75,000 that was the cutoff. And then when we went and looked for a new number, we got 90,000 to restore it to 80%. And we realized that when you got to that 75 and then to the 90, that if you earned $1 more, you were cut off. So we created a slope by tinkering with the house value to when you got to the 80%, you didn't get thrown off immediately. It was tapered down.
Interesting.
And that's a layman's presentation.
And we have tinkered on a regular basis.
We tinkered in here and asked JFO and let's say Bill Talbot and Mark Peralt and others to say, how do we get back to treating 80% of the population as we had been treating them, and they've been falling off because their salaries have gone up. And that's where we're at that point again.
Got up into the 70s.
So I was just curious, so you were saying 75,097 was the income threshold?
Yes.
So by the US Bureau of Labor Statistics CPI calculator, 75,097 is equivalent of 142,000. And
Well,
change.
it might not be the 80
Right.
in Vermont, it might be a different number.
Right. I mean, just pure.
Okay, but that just gives you a difference of the range, and if we've held it 90, then that would explain the percentage difference. But that there is a cost to doing that. And last week, we were looking at if we just raise the house value this year, that the folks having a lesser valued house would pay more because the yield, we haven't officially said it, but it's been given out to the towns that if they are good and come in at the projected rate of spending, that this is what the yield will be. So if they have done that, and I believe they have this year, maybe even a little less, for us to do anything major to the yield would probably not be looked at happily.
Right. So yes, if the $400,000 house side cap was increased, then the other property taxpayers would need to pay for it. That's how the ed fund is sort of self-correcting.
Yeah.
Unless there was another source of revenue introduced, then it could pay for it that way. So that's the options.
And Chair, the statewide property tax was the revenue, one of the revenue sources for permitting 80% of the homeowners to pay based on the house and 2 acres based on income. So when we don't include 80% anymore, and we get down into 54%, the winners are the homeowners or the people that pay the statewide property tax, who no longer have to pay for 80%, but only have to pay for 54%. So when we keep the 80% whole, then the system is kept whole. And the chair is correct in saying some people will grumble if we catch up again to how the bill worked. But as the percentages dropped, they've been getting a easier ride than the system was designed to provide them.
Okay, but I doubt that anyone's property tax has not gone up. Maybe it should have gone up more. But I think a rule of thumb in taxing is if we go, or any kind of fee, is if we go up too quickly, it will not be well received. So the first thing is to figure out, it sounds like the CPI has gone up. We know home values have gone up. I don't know that we've ever made 80, maybe the first year, but it looks like the low 70s is the best we've done.
My understanding, will be proved wrong, but when we went to $90,000 and the household value, we essentially restored the 80%.
When, do you know when we went to 90? Because we have not been anywhere near 80 since 2013. And this went in
It was
2019.
before 2013.
It was.
The first time we restored it, I think was with a year or two after Act 68, and we put 4 cents towards the tax rate on both home residential and non-residential. We had a surplus in the ed fund, and we took enough of that surplus to restore the 80% and lowered the tax rate less than we would have had we simply kept our hands off the system.
Okay. Senator Bray.
I have a historical question for the archivist. So if you just took 80% of income level, you'd have a figure. But are you saying, and you could not even look at house value, but then it's offensive to some people. You have modest income, but a very palatial home. So then we brought down the threshold for how valuable your home could be. That would push some people off the list. So then instead of 80% income, you could go higher and still have 80% of the taxpayers. Just trying to make sure I get the dynamics. Start with one, bring down the other, and then you could go back up. And there's that play between those two numbers.
The dilemma was the 75% threshold that went from 97 to about 04, 05, was that when you earned $75,001, you were off.
Right.
And and your tax rate just went shoot right up to your house value.
So
then we did the slope, like 90 to 135.
yeah, and that got played with a fair amount, has been played with in the past as housing values have changed. But our goal has always been to keep the majority of people paying. I mean, the underlying thing is that the value of your property does not necessarily reflect your ability to pay. That is more so with older people who are on fixed incomes. And that was even before we don't have any place for them to live.
Right.
There's no small housing, readily available that you can move into. So,
people on the other end, their income is genuinely low,
right,
but they're property rich, like farmers.
yes,
Or they retired, which was one of the things that the bill did, was that when you retired, that your obligations dropped because they were for 80% tied to your income. One of the other, in the discussions that I've had since last week, how did we come up with the system? Why did we come up with the system that we did in 1997 and not tag it more rigidly to income from the beginning to the end? And I forgot that one of the, dealing with the governor who didn't oppose the bill we passed. The governor opposed the income tax, and the rationale the governor gave for opposing income tax was that Vermont needed the income tax, they needed it to pass the healthcare reform bills, which were were predicted to be completed in the late 90s and the first decade at that time. And we never did those things. And that income tax that was being saved for the healthcare reform bills has never been, has been saved, it continues to be saved. So
Well,
how would
it's
we-
the capacity, the tax capacity. It's not that we're saving cash.
Yeah.
We went through this with looking at going to paying for education on income last year. There is only so much tax capacity. And if you use it to use it completely for schools, then you don't have it to pay for other services. It's called elasticity, and it's not,
I think
we
we all
haven't done,
agree on
and we
that.
don't have a tax capacity study.
Yeah, we all agree on that. It was just counting one of the things that the governor said, when speaking with this committee through the chair, Senator Greenwood, who were the ones that sat with him most often, was that he was opposed to an income tax and wouldn't support it and needed it for the healthcare bill that was being contemplated.
That's my,
So that was Governor Dean.
Governor Dean.
so,
Your point is we should start with the moderate income as an
So
alternative.
I'm just, that is part of
that's
this.
just part of the history.
I think the JFO could show us how to restore 80% to being able to pay based on their income. And where the options of where it would come from.
Well, is in the system, it would come from the folks that are not paying based on their income, but there was
Which was 20%.
Yeah, right. Julie Richter, Joint Fiscal Office. So there was some modeling that was done during the Education Income Tax Study Committee that was looking to address certain areas. That this specific question wasn't addressed in the Income Education Tax Study Committee. I did present and testify to this question last year in this committee. And the findings were there is differing relationship within a household where some households have a high property value and a lower income, and others have a lower income and a higher property value. So for some households, it's cheaper to pay on property than it is to pay on income, and that's one of the challenges of that modeling. And I will also say that while increasing the property tax credit, or as Jake was mentioning, increasing the property tax credit for households so that they can apply more to their house side value, then that's going to shake out on either side, the people who are already paying on income and the people who are not receiving a property tax credit.
Yeah, and we looked at just moving everything up, thinking that that would cause people with higher income to pay a greater percentage, but we did run into, I'm thinking 17,000, but I'm not sure if that's people that paid on their house site because it was cheaper, or people that didn't pay any income tax at all.
Non-residential, many non-residential property owners don't pay income taxes.
Well,
They're not
we're talking about residential
Correct.
property tax only.
Yes, but the
homestead.
revenues that reduced the property taxes, the school education taxes for residential property owners came from the non-residential property tax, which is why we passed it. Was to collect money from that group to support 80% of Vermont, the 80% of Vermonters who pay the large housing waivers based on income.
But Senator, I think any of us who've been here any time what we think we're doing when we do a bill and what actually plays out in reality are not always the same thing. Okay, and I don't know that we can find a place where it says we ever hit 80%. The committee might have been told it was gonna be 80%, but these are complex systems. I've never seen 80%.
I believe it was reported on to the sense that way. It
Yes.
was in the paper that way, and you would perhaps Captain Bennett or even though we came afterwards, or others that
We,
could verify what it was.
I really don't care.
Okay.
We are here now.
Yeah.
And I think if we want to raise the CPI to where $75,000 was in 97, and if it is in fact anywhere near 142,000, that is going to cause a major disruption in the system,
You
which
bet.
is not a good thing in a tax system.
Madam Chair, you are correct. And it only becomes not a good thing when you ignore the erosion that has taken place over a period of years.
We're not ignoring it, we're trying to address it.
Well, it is more difficult to address when it hasn't been addressed for a decade than it would have been if it had been addressed periodically, to which I
I remember,
chastise myself for not,
we have tried to address it.
I love the way you two agree, but say
Yes.
different things.
We've been at it a long time.
So with the increase in property values, that is now more people are going to be excluded from income sensitivity. Do we know at what percentage of taxpayers are now going to pay based on income? Because more and more people
Well, they aren't
sort of
they aren't
they moved
excluded.
out because
64% was the number we got a couple of days
Okay.
back, and it may be,
But that's-
some may want to adjust that number for reasons that I can't.
All right.
They may have, yeah.
But I'm gonna look to Julia and everybody else. But it's your income that sets whether or not you are eligible for income sensitivity. The ramp is that you pay, it ramps, your income ramps up, so you pick up more and more cost. Was it 140 or 132? And then if your house was worth $400,000 last year, your entire value of your house was, I think, income sensitized. If it's worth 600 this year, you are going to pay the full property tax, I think, on that additional 200, am I right? That's where the increase is coming. I think the reason we're at the 64% is because what 90% represented as 90,000 represented as a percentage of Vermonters making that income has dropped because incomes have gone up, and we have seen a major inflation in this past year or two in both income and housing values, which I think has brought us to the point where we feel we need to do something to rectify that, and the question is how much and how do we do that without causing shock to the system. And I know you want to do that. I'm trying to see where the rest of the committee is. Are you interested in putting some time in here and looking at this?
So I'm relatively new to these conversations. And yeah, the one thing I'm very interested in and understanding and overlaying of this conversation is H480, which I understand was just assigned to our committee today. That is very optimistic about what that will propose of positive.
H480.
So my understanding from what a couple of files I've looked at, as well as some other conversations, and I look forward to a walkthrough of it, it will disambiguate the non-homestead properties so that we can identify on our grand list the rental properties, like actual multi-story units that are occupied 90%,
Yeah.
commercial properties, and then possibly vacation vacant homes. So that is an opportunity where I think that a lot of these levers, it's really worth our time to look at these levers, because these are our taxpayers, our
Right.
homesteaders. But well, you gotta think about the renters as well as the vacant homes that are sitting darkened and using tax policy.
I've been waiting for this, which is why we didn't take up the taxing them until we knew we could separate them. And we can use that perhaps as a vehicle to send back. But part of it is, we don't know. I'm reluctant. I'm a little cautious about biting the hand that feeds you.
It was, the golden egg, that we were worried about slaughtering the goose that laid the golden eggs.
Whatever.
That's back when the majority of Stowe's houses, dwellings, were second homes.
They still are.
No, I think third home is beating second home.
I am not getting into class jealousy. I'm not trying to get into whether it's a third home or a fifth home. It is either a homestead in which people live or full-time, or it is a non-homestead in which people don't live full-time, and it is none of my business how many homes they own.
True,
Okay,
it's our business how much they get taxed.
yes. And we already have a non-homestead tax rate. It does have commercial and second homes or homes that aren't homesteads in it. The first thing we need to do is separate those, because in general, business properties have not appreciated anywhere near what housing has appreciated. So to just raise everybody's tax rates the same.
Appreciate about a quarter,
Yes.
so to speak.
Also remember that those non-homesteads pay property taxes to support the schools to which they send no children. Thus, why we took all the money away from Stowe. Because they had lots of money and not very many children.
That's where we went
That,
to get.
well,
those
Stowe will
benefits.
debate you, and so won't Warren and Wadesfield and,
Well, they did last time.
yes. But I want to do this on good tax policy, not on, we're unhappy that some people can afford 3 homes and we can't
Happy about
afford
it. I'm
one.
delighted,
Good,
just as I was when we taxed them.
okay, but tax also has to be just. I think that's part of a fair tax policy.
We're having the same arguments that the people who passed and established Act 60 had.
Yes. And right now, I'm trying to figure out, we can get into how we're going, if we're going to treat second homes differently. But I'm trying to figure if we're going to do anything for next year in just adjusting the present system. We are not going to rewrite the present system in the 2 or 3 weeks we've got left. But if we want to make some changes that will impact income sensitivity, the people covered for next year, we've got to do it in the next 2 weeks. I'm trying to bite off, I don't know, mouthful we can chew here.
Just two things. One, I welcome a correction if I'm mistaken in my understanding that the non-homesteads currently includes like multi-story, multi-rental units. And that's what I'm really interested in pulling out, because there are Vermonters that rent, and right now I just don't think we have enough levers to accommodate or to adjust for their life circumstances. But to your other point, I definitely support having some adjusting the income sensitization scale. And I'd be curious, I remember with the childcare discussion, it was always we're pegged to the federal poverty level. And not that we're going to do that massive jump this year, but looking at a 5-10 year runway to calibrate it and possibly get it to a place where it just auto adjusts relative to a recognized. It's a conversation.
So that would make life easier. Yeah, I think we can accomplish two things. We can take the H bill we just got, and we can ask to have residential and commercial properties separated out. And I will hear from the clerks about whether or not they can do that, but I'm pretty sure they can. And then we can look at those numbers and then decide, along with the new renter rebate, which is really a housing subsidy, we can look at that. We can also decide if we want, you know, what would be the impact of raising the income and or the housing, the threshold. And can you do something like that for us if we raise, we can't go to 142, but if we raised it from 90 to 100, or to the income level, can you do those calculations?
So adjusting income sensitivity, so adjusting the income level from 90 to.
If we can
a higher
figure out what
income?
it's 80% of, if it's the 80th percentile of income in Vermont.
So I would have to talk with Deb Wrighting, who has done the modeling. I don't have that modeling bill. I don't know if Jake would
can you
know that
model it?
quickly.
Because Deb, I know, is trying to retire, so they're somewhat reluctant to do.
Yeah, tax and GFO can talk about it. That's not that hard.
Okay, if you can help us figure out what would be the result if we went from 90 to 100,000, and then raised the house value to 5, or just float everything up and see what it looked like and what that would do to tax rates.
Would these be pondered for next year so that we don't affect the current bill
Yes.
estimate?
Yeah, and if I've got a bill, then I have miscellaneous tax, but I'd like to get the yield bill out of here since we don't seem to be having any major changes to that. And then see where we go, all right? And we can do this. Brad, do you want to add anything to this conundrum?
Not necessarily. Brad James, State of Education.
I'll take a week.
What Senator McDonald said was right. As I recall, there used to be a cliff when you hit that 90
Yes.
or whatever the number was,
Yeah.
plus $1, you drop
Yeah,
it.
nothing.
And that's part of the reason why that tail was built in. So, I mean, again, if you were to graph it for the same house by a bunch of different taxpayer incomes, the more your income is, the more you pay, and then all of a sudden you hit that
Right.
90,000, and the slope gets steeper
Yeah.
and drops off precipitously. So I mean, it's in that sense it's working. as Jake said, and as a couple other people said, if you were to increase that homestead value exclusion, that income sensitized $400,000, then somebody has to pay for it because you still have the same demand on the education fund. And generally speaking, the way that would happen is the yields would be adjusted, which means everybody, including those people benefiting from it, will be paying a little bit, their tax rates would go change slightly too. Because it impacts everyone in the
Well, if
state.
we raised the income, if we just took this system and moved it up $10,000, kept the float in there, it would play out just as it does now,
Exactly.
differently for different taxpayers. And I think that's part of what the income study was what we were trying to do, was find a way to make those few very wealthy people pay more, and we didn't really find a way to do that
That's in-state wealthy.
in state, yeah.
In-state. Moving their income tax would have in-state wealthy pay more.
No, this was when we were trying to find a way to go to make property tax paid based on your income. If,
Yes.
you know, I'm paying 7%, the guy making 10 million should pay 7%. The easiest way was to do a flat tax, but that didn't work. And you don't want to tax reform. But I think, and we won't know, because no one can tell us. We sent Stowe home the first time and said, come back and tell us what it's going to do to your tax bill. And they couldn't tell us.
They're not going to be able to. I think that's something that Jake and Julie do better because they don't have the ability to see everything that's going on.
Yeah, well, we've got 3-year roll, and we've got the common level of appraisal. And I think it's a very complicated system, and it does what it's supposed to. But in times of change like this, when I'm assuming they're getting calls from residents saying, what's my tax bill gonna do? You know, my house has gone up $200,000 in value. And they can't tell them, which is not a place that a local official likes to be. Anybody.
No, again, full disclosure, I do live in Stowe.
Yes, I know.
I know you do.
But they're mine now.
And I've had this conversation with people, you know, if it was a perfect world, which it's not, but if it was a perfect world, everybody was, you know, at the same level right now, and you readjusted everything, then basically your tax would be, everybody's tax would be roughly where they are now, because your value would go up, but the CLA would go up, and the tax rate would go down, all else being constant. You know, people aren't exactly at the same point. Think of Burlington a couple of years ago. That was a big issue where people hadn't been appraised in a long time. They're really out of whack. Their taxes really shot up. If people were close to where they're supposed to be, then it'll be not a huge difference. But people aren't.
No.
I know my house.
I'm pretty sure I know where my house is gonna come in, and I'm looking forward to paying taxes on it. And my income hasn't changed. So, yeah, and I think that's it, that there's so much transition going on and so much inflation that especially folks at fixed incomes are getting hit with, that there's a lot of concern out there, and we can't tell them.
In the 12 years between
Yes.
the foundation being established and it being replaced 12 years later in 1997, we went through severe income shortages. We had selling bailout. We had all sorts of experiences very much like the one we're going through now, and like the next one we'll go through in years to come. There's never so an easy time to deal with something like this. But something like this is much more difficult. Put it off year after year after year, and get to a place like now, when we are saying to ourselves, maybe we shouldn't have let it get down to 4%. There was a remark made earlier about folks that rent and people who own the property. And the current administration did the rental changes
The
for
rebate.
school funding, which were much more thoughtfully crafted than the ones that the system replaced. And
It's
it's
the
time,
tax
and
department
and then
that did
when it passed, we had to
And
go
it,
back and say,
yeah,
thank
it
you
was.
again. The impact on those properties and the people who live in them would be much less dramatic thanks to the work.
If they're still living in them,
If
because.
someone is living in them,
If someone is there.
and the people who own them pay property taxes to collect rent and don't pay.
But we've seen more than a few evictions, or not evictions, just I'm raising the rent $1,000 because I can get it now. And I think we might find that some of those people we were trying to help, maybe in Motel 6, just because of the inflation. It's supply and demand. There's a lot of demand and not a lot of supply. And yeah,
True,
so we're gonna,
because we know who builds structures that people live in. We know who builds them, and we know who doesn't build them in our nation, in our community, where the wealthy get wealthier and the working folks fall farther behind, makes this thing we're talking about
okay.
tougher.
But right now, I would bet heavy money that the biggest housing developer in the state are the nonprofits. And I would also bet that they are the majority that go through Act 250. And part of the information I want is how many private developers actually go through Act 250 doing more than 10 units, because I'm pretty sure that's not going on. At least I'm not seeing it on the landscape. And right now, we just put between $200 and $300 million into housing. That's gotta be, the state of Vermont's gotta be the biggest housing developer in the state. And we are building McMansions, but that's not helping everyone, and it's not helping the people that already own their homes that don't want to go into a condo downtown in an apartment building, living with people that have been living in Motel 6. Just not where my grandmother wants to go. So we've got an issue, but we're dealing with property taxes. And if somebody can do some kind of a model and just figure out, what's going on this year. And I know it's gonna be worse in some towns than others. The big vacation towns are always high demand. They're higher priced housing. Getting worker housing has been an issue as long as I've been in this building. Sugar Bush is actually building it for their workers. But if we can figure out what is going on in general, to the average Vermonter, when your house goes up $200,000 in value and your income goes up $20, what's happening out there? Because if it's as bad as some people think it might be, there will be an outcry, and we need to know what's gonna happen.
Well, I would say that, as Brad mentioned, the CLA's going down and the yields going up, it all kind of balances itself out. So Julia has on the Ed Fund Outlook a new line, which everyone should pay attention to, that's average bill increase. And I think it's 3.8 4%.
Yeah, it's, okay,
So,
so that's still what we're looking at.
yeah, so even if your house is now worth a lot more than it used to be, you know, the system is kind of gonna work itself out. And, you know, obviously there's variations, but it's
Yeah.
not like that in and of itself means your taxes are gonna go up.
How significant is the range of variation?
It depends on what you vote for school spending.
Can you give me an idea of what range?
Range of variation in what, in appraisals
Yeah.
or? in
No, the
tax
range of
bills?
variation in the tax for the
Okay.
individual taxpayer as a result of these changes. If there's a way to even think about that, because there are other moving parts here.
There's a lot of,
I think the average per pupil spending increase was around 8%.
I think that sounds right.
So if you voted to do 16%, yeah, on your, a town meeting day, then your tax increases, it's gonna be higher. But I don't know the spread.
I can find the spread for you as to what people have done this year to last, or this year to what they're proposed, what they're going to do next year. I just want to piggyback on the one thing Jake said, we were talking about the sensitivity. I think one thing to remember is that the tax credit is based on the prior year information. So if your house value goes up that first year, you're not getting the benefit. Your tax lags behind by a year. So the first year your tax will be done here. The second year it'll come up because of the way the calculation works.
so we've
But
got a
there is
year to find out what's going on and
Well, I think we're finding out for what's going on for a couple of years at this point, since COVID hit.
at which point the housing values will probably come down a little bit, just going up so high.
What we've looked at in the past, and we might want to review to see if it continues to be true, was to look at where the spending increases took place. And the study that was done in the late 90s, this one, said that of the 5 quintiles of spending, that where there were the most income sensitive homes owned was where the lowest rates of school spending
Yes.
increases took place, and where the fewest, the towns that had the fewest people who were paid based on income, was where the school spending took place at a greater levels of increase. We had hired a couple of people to come in and recommend to us what changes we might make. Where we had over a couple times.
I'm drawing a line, but I know you're.
And their recommendation, they would come in and say, well, your problem with spending is that the people that have low tax rates or are helped by your formula are the ones that are driving the spending, and they were incorrect. When Vermont ran the numbers, that wasn't the case. They were the ones that were falling
Right,
behind.
that's always the no skin in the game argument. But no, I think, and it was Rebecca Holcomb, when she was commissioner, that said to us, there is inequality in our schools. The poor schools, even with income sensitivity, cannot afford, because their people are poor, to spend the same amount as the people who are wealthier. You want to see this culture war being played out, try the new unified school district in Barry. Barrytown is much wealthier place than Barry City. And there's different, they voted down their school budget because it was too low. We know we've got that issue. It's showing up in school construction, it's showing up, there are schools out there that people in other parts of the state wouldn't send their dog to, that we're sending kids to. They've got swamps draining into the basement, they've got, roofs that are leaking, they've got all kinds of things. It is an issue. And poor communities, no matter what we do, at least under this formula, they went from $3.29, I think, in standard down to $1.10, which was a huge decrease. But they're still struggling to pay the tax rate. And they're still gonna fight seeing that tax go up at all.
I'm sure that
And
if you do that, then our job is what we determine it.
well, we tried by the,
People.
yeah, and we tried to get them to join because you're never gonna be economical if you've got 3 kids in every grade.
We're talking at 46.
Yeah, that was part of the motivation, is to get some economies of scale and get some more equality in there, but
We haven't dropped to 64% because
No.
Act 46 didn't pass.
no, we have not. But no matter what we do to get to 80%, we are still have very poor towns that even with 80% of their people paid based on their income, that is still more than they can really afford to pay. These are people that are very poor,
Then they will choose.
then they will choose to pay.
Meanwhile,
So,
that's the best we can do, is to get it to that
That's-
80% and then not choosing to pay it.
okay, well,
Let's
we
get
are
there.
not, there's nothing magical about 80%. I think we do want to stop the slide and start moving that back up, but we're not going to $142,000.
Well, let's
In
get some
one-
numbers
in
on
one-
how we might stop the slide and inch
Well,
back
that's what I've
upwards.
asked
Yeah.
Julia to come up with, and if you can figure out what would happen if we raise the income sensitivity level to 100,000. What would we pick up? How would it sugar out if somebody can do that run? That would be,
Good start on that. Thank you.
okay. Thank you. Just for putting up with this.
You can release the tourniquet now.
Pick a number, any number.
Just promise me you won't park yourself in the pro tem's office today.
Is that common occurrence?
No, just when he's upset.
Forward. I said we're having wrestling with stuff in finance, sliding back.
We
Stuff
should
in
go
two-
offline. We are